Back once again, our final segment with General Tom Wilkerson, the CEO of the U.S. Naval Institute, one of America's oldest military organizations. Is this a war, first of all, as far as you're concerned, when we talk about terrorism? Is there a war on terrorism?
Yeah, and it's not new, though. Americans have been fighting terrorism since Jefferson was president. That's where Marines earned their sword, in Tripoli, the Mamluk sword for going out and stopping terrorists from hijacking ships and piracy. Well, it is not going to go away. On the other hand, it is not necessarily a threat every day. And that's something our leaders have got to engage themselves with, because you can't just tell Americans that this is an open-ended conflict and we're going to have to fight it forever.
But what, I guess the difference in my mind would be, if they're pulling ships off the high seas out there, 2 centuries ago, 2,000 or 3,000 miles away, that's one thing. But even though terrorism may not be an everyday thing in this country, what if they do get the bomb or something close to the bomb? What if they do have some sort of tremendous ability to deliver anthrax or smallpox or something like that, which some recent commissions are now saying is, could well happen within 5 years.
It's possible in the next 5 years or something.
Well, how do we deal with that?
That's the question. And the answer might well be, what you do is you begin to find a better way to integrate yourself into the neighborhood that's America, instead of just trying to be the Lone Ranger that goes out and does it all on your own. We tend to do a lot of things because we have the power, and we think we're always going to have it. And yet here we are, the world's last remaining superpower by our own expectations, and we're 7 years into a war we haven't won yet. And look at what we do with our defense forces. And we have great reasons for that, but if you were running it like a business and your job was to defend us, then you'd have to look back and say, where's the knee in the curve?
It's interesting to be able to talk to you about this, because one of my earliest memories as a kid who, for some bizarre reason, took an interest in world affairs at a very young age was as President Eisenhower left and gave that great speech about beware the military-industrial complex. You're a senior military officer who has served at the highest levels of our nation's armed forces. Is there a military-industrial complex that's still in place right now that is pulling us in a direction that is not good for us as a nation?
That's a powerful question. I think there is a complex, but it's easily seen and understood. If you look at the major defense contractors and look at their revenue streams, look at the things that they produce for the government, it would be different if we had a shipbuilding industry that built commercial vessels as well as warships. What we have is a warship building industry. It builds only for the government by and large. Okay? That means that that's kind of a very clear definition of a military-industrial complex. And they have vested interests, and their congressional supporters have vested interests. But in the larger context of the nation, then you have to ask, what are we doing with the military force that we have, and how much is enough? I think the latest stats, we spend more than 2 through 20 combined. And we are very powerful in a conventional and in a nuclear or weapons of mass destruction. But it doesn't necessarily mean the other guys are going to do it the way we want it done.
So when we see the Russians flex their muscle and suddenly you have Medvedev down with some Russian warships down there in Venezuela, we say what to that?
Yeah, and what we really say, I don't understand how we can say that, what do we want out of Russia? Do we want Russia to be an enemy? Do we want Russia to be kind of a neutral player? Do we want Russia to be an outright friend? And if we knew which of those we wanted, then we could make some influence. So we, for instance, say we don't want to be Rome. We're not conquering the world. Yet we have military commands that cover virtually the entire globe, except for Antarctica. And you look at the newest one, the Africa Command. And you say, well, where is it based? Is it based in Germany? And nobody in Africa wants it. And yet we say we don't really want to be perceived as Romans. Well, what if the Russians decided they wanted to set up a northern command and they set it down in Cuba just because they want to pay attention to something?
Or just to balance out their sense of being wronged by us?
Their sense of being threatened by the idea. I don't know how we get around the idea that we want to put missiles in Poland because they're threatened by Iran.
And they come back with the ones in Kaliningrad. But on the other hand, I mean, the New York Times has a front-page story yesterday about the Kremlin apparently using its muscle to bring back into its fold during some hard economic times corporations to renationalize them, essentially. It gives one the impression that the old
guard might be coming back.
And that maybe we cannot, while we're worried about terrorists, maybe we still need the conventional and nuclear deterrence that we always maintained.
I'm sure from a cultural perspective in the military, nothing would be better than to find a peer competitor, because we've lived our lives knowing how to successfully counter peer competitors. It is far less sexy and far more difficult to counter someone who doesn't get that lecture and wants to do irregular operations, terrorist operations, the things that we call banana wars from the Marine Corps sector. And the people who are doing this, there's one thing, that I know we only have a little segment left, but one thing America has to pay the most attention to, in my judgment, is regardless of the size of the military, we need to pay close attention to taking care of the Americans who volunteer.
Yes, sir.
The ones who write blank checks that include their lives to be on the ramparts and defend the country from the threats that might change the way we live.
Do you think the appointment of General Shinseki to become the next Secretary of Veterans Affairs is a good move?
Let me tell you, if General Shinseki doesn't know how to take care of soldiers, there's nobody in America who knows how to take care of soldiers. He knows exactly what's necessary, and I don't just mean Army soldiers, I mean veterans in the larger sense. He's an inspirational selection because he brings a care of a lifetime for the very veterans that we need to take care of today. And it's not just patriotic. It's because America says we want an all-volunteer force. That means America has to set the environment in which we keep that force. And that includes not just when you serve, like your son did, but when you come out. And then you're looking to join the greater community and get a job and raise a family and live your life. And you're competing with people who've already been there.
Yep.
If you find out, like in a down market right now, that you're not able to get a job, 200,000 Americans come out of the military every year, peace or war, because it's an up or out system.
Yep.
And they cycle them through.
Yep.
They're looking for jobs. They're looking to live in communities and to compete and to find the American way of life now that they're no longer in service. If the word gets out that they're not being successful, if people look at post-traumatic stress syndrome, or they're nervous about hiring veterans, or they're worried because they want to be in the Guard or Reserve, all of those things play against maintaining the all-volunteer force.
Right, and it violates our commitment to what we say we are.
That's right.
General, we have to leave it there. Let's do this again sometime soon, sir.
My pleasure, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you
General
very
Tom
much.
Wilkerson.